Welcome back to the Politics with Paul podcast. I'm your host, Paul Rader. We've got another great episode on tap because it won't be just me droning on. No, no, no. We have another guest. I always lead off guest episodes by saying I do not take specific stances for or against anybody's political views or any political groups they belong to, but that hasn't been a concern so far, and it's not today either, because today we're talking about the importance of the preservation of political history. But it's not just because, as the old saying more or less goes, those who do not know the mistakes of the past are doomed to repeat them. It's also about knowing why we got to where we are and how to improve things. So, how do we best preserve political history? How do we make that history more accessible and engaging for other people, especially if they're not as interested in history? And these are just a couple key questions, not just for my own work, but for the work of my guest today, Alex Vassar. Alex is an historian and the communications manager for the California State Library. In 2005, he founded JoinCalifornia.com, which is a repository and treasure trove of political history and data for the state of California going back to its early days of statehood. He's also the founder of the One Voter Project, which describes itself as an attempt to increase civic engagement or involvement, in California, educating the public about the rich political history of California through joincalifornia.com and encouraging involvement in the current politics. So, let's talk about that work in preserving and teaching political history and some lessons for other states undertaking the same endeavors. Please welcome Alex Vassar. Alex, how are you doing today?
Doing good. Thank you for having me on the show, Paul. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you being on here. So I want to get back to the beginning for you because
Yeah.
I mentioned Join California and One Voter Project, California State Library, but let's go before that because you've also worked in various capacities in state and local government as well. So what were your earliest experiences that led you to this interest in politics and in history?
I grew up in Monterey County, California, which is on the Central Coast, and it's where Steinbeck was from. It's an interesting area, and so
Oh,
you have a connection to the past there. It was also prior to California becoming a U.S. state. Monterey was the longtime capital during the Mexican era and back into the Spanish era, and
oh,
so being able to go places and see where people had you know done things where people had lived their lives was just really, really interesting. And so kind of had that interest as I went into college and became a history major. Turned out I was not a good history major. That came as quite a shock. I loved history and started a history major. And the way that they do it in California, as they do in most of these places, is they start you with the way far back. And I couldn't keep track of the ancient civilizations. I could not keep track of. I was much more interested kind of in the more modern history where you can actually meet folks who have lived a certain era and understand by talking to them what that was like. And so that was kind of my introduction to this strange and crazy world that we're navigating now.
yeah, this is a little similar for me. There is a point where it gets too far back that it's not something I can quite grasp it at least as well as other people. I definitely am a little bit more modern. I guess 250 years. I mean, depends on lots of people say that modern is like 500 years old or whatever, but I don't really get that definition, but that's neither here nor there. So I mentioned that you founded joincalifornia.com in 2005, and over the course of 20 years, it has built up an immense database of information about California's political history. And I've found a couple of places sort of like it, but so far I haven't quite found one that's quite in depth as Join California's is. So what convinced you of the need to build this project?
Um, That's I always like to attribute stuff to questionable life choices. Questionable life choices led me here. I was a political science major, and that was high end. I started as a history major, ended up as political science, and was doing a research project for a paper that I was writing, um, and so built up a collection, kind of I think it was about 20 years of statewide election results into a single spreadsheet. Just so you could see who received the most votes, who received the fewest votes, and which is really another interesting area where you look at like different districts, at least in California, are drawn with equal populations, but voter turnout is significantly different with different populations. So you end up with massive discrepancies in the number of votes that people are elected with. So I was working on all this, And a good friend of mine said, why don't you put this online? I said, well, who else would ever want to see this? I imagine most people live far more interesting lives than I do, and would have no time for this. And he's like, no, this could be good. And so Shane Myers actually wrote the script that turned an Excel spreadsheet into the basis for this website. And then we were able to go in and put in a little bit more information, not biological, biographical information about the different folks. And that's when it started getting interesting, because you start running into, when you're dealing with people's lives, um, people are all interesting. You very rarely, whenever you find somebody that's not particularly interesting, it's generally, you're looking at folks as a group. Oh, I don't really like dentists. It's like, no, like, but you look at a specific dentist. It's like, how did you end up wanting to spend your life with your fingers in somebody else's mouth? And it's fascinating. Like, individuals are fascinating, and so just kind of getting into that was kind of where things really started expanding.
Yeah, I kind of I like knowing those random tidbits of history, partly to make myself sound more interesting than I actually am. That, like, if I just talk to somebody like, hey, this really weird thing that they more than likely won't care about, but I still think it's funny and or interesting to learn about. And I trying to build up maybe not something quite similar to Join California, but I've been trying to find like a partisan history of like an all encompassing partisan history of the United States, and I've personally never found it. So I've been I don't know how long it's going to be till I really get to make it fully public, but I've been building up this political history database of sorts myself, doing it from the both for federal and state level, because I think that state level stuff is also just as fascinating. Obviously, most of the focus is on the federal level, but there's so much more that's fascinating at the state level. So actually just made me think now. So what are some of the sources that have really helped you to put this this information together? And obviously you've got official election results from the Secretary of State for California, but
Yep.
what are some of the other ways that you've found this information?
So starting, yeah, the basic building blocks were the election results, and California has published election results. So California became a state 1850, and it was about 1892 ish, 1890, 1892, where the state of California, the Secretary of State, started publishing election results. And so you go prior to that, and it's a nightmare. It's all over the place. And I think most folks don't know that is election results were not uh, published as a document. Like, now it's so easy, but yeah, back in the day, it was you're relying on newspaper records. They would count the votes, they'd publish it in the newspaper, but they would generally only publish their local results. And so to the extent I could, using election results for 1890 onward. And then prior to that, a lot of what I was doing was just basing it on who served in the legislature. So you don't necessarily know who lost in a lot of these elections, but you know who served. And so you can kind of put them in and say, oh, they won. Not sure how many votes or who they ran against, but you start with that. And then there's a publication that a lot of states used to do called the Blue Book. Was really, really popular. And so California published, we did our Blue Book from 1890, 1888 to 1975, and stopped in 75. We did one more in 2000, and then we haven't done one since. So in the last 50 years, we've only had one edition that's come out. Which is really unfortunate, because it's such a great. It's got biographies of the members, descriptions of the different departments within state government, which I always think kind of gives you insights into the problems that the state is trying to solve, and also the mechanisms that the state is using to try to solve them. And so, yeah, just that was a great resource. And then going farther back, I actually have some here. Should have pulled them out. Um, um, they had older publications, it's just to print out, but lists of state officers. And so,
Oh wow.
going through that, these were published at each session of the legislature, and a lot of legislatures had this, and they would just it's kind of the basic information: name, place of birth, from where they emigrated, their age, their occupation, marital status, and political party. And so you can use that, and then if you have way too much time on your hands, you can go on like ancestry.com or some of the other genealogy and try to track down these people and see, more than just an age or a birth year. What was their specific birthday? And what happened with their lives afterwards? Because a lot of times, somebody will live 60, 65, 70 years, and they were in the legislature for 2 to 4. And it's like, well, what else? What else did they do? What was what happened before that kind of would have educated them, and then what happened afterwards that would have helped them, what they have used their experience to accomplish later.
Yeah, it's kind of a thankless job finding all these like little bits about like the state level. I mean, federal level is a lot easier to find information on, but the state level and then the local level, you can almost a lot of times you can just forget about finding information for that, just because, like you said, there is a great disparity in how accessible all this information is. You bring it up the blue books. That just reminded me of this book right this book
Ah,
right here. It is part of I used it as part of my uh, project I was talking about with the political histories of the United States. And then when I was working at Ballotpedia, there was a project that I did for them too. But basically, it was the party affiliation divisions in the state legislatures up until 2006, because the book came out like 2007. So, but he was just like what you were talking about, using newspapers and blue books and stuff like that. It's just like it is very painstaking to find that stuff, but it's stuff that really needs to be preserved. So I really appreciate you doing that kind of work. And speaking of which, I mean, it is pretty incredible the amount of information that is on JoinCalifornia.com. I don't remember if we said it specifically yet, but you have election results, you have key historical figures, anniversaries, countdowns to elections, and other political events, and a lot more stuff. But obviously, this is a massive undertaking and it's been going on for a long time. So, what has been the most difficult aspect or two in building up this database?
um, the the still living folks, the folks that are dead, are generally they complain very little about the content that you put in there. One of the things for living folks, they're worried about their reputations, both um, how they will be seen if they're going to be running for additional offices. So one of the things that has been a challenge is when you'll have an elected official, they're married, and then they're not married. Well, can you take my ex's name off of the page? And it's like, well, it was in your biography. I mean, it is a
Yeah.
significant part of your biography, and so, but I don't like her anymore. And, well, that
Doesn't mean she wasn't there.
yeah, well, yeah, and so that is one of those things where it's trying to balance respect for people's lives with having an accurate telling of what happened. There's also people die in interesting ways, and I would say for God, that's awkward way to phrase it, but if you look at uh, perhaps politicians in particular, they tend to live interesting lives, and so every once in a while you'll run into just some amazing crazy thing, and that tends to be, if you're looking for you're looking for a specific name for someone. Often the last articles that you find are their obituary, and so you get to find out like died of a heart attack in bed, set himself on fire in a hotel room, threw himself into the Potomac covered in chains. Like, I mean, all of those
Is that
real things.
a real
Those
thing?
are all things, yeah. And
Oh, wow.
it's trying to have consistency. I mean, if you look at like a bio guide from Library of Congress,
Hmm.
they have a formula, and there is value to that in terms of consistency. But then there's also just to add a little bit more flavor, to like, here's he lost his arm in a threshing machine accident. It's like, oh wow, that'll shape you.
Yeah.
That'll change your experience. And so yeah, so I do like putting in the details. And sometimes people are like, I don't like that you do that, and I say, well, that's okay. I actually made the website for me. That's what I tell folks. I made it to reflect my interests and my worldview. And sure, if you're willing to commit a couple thousand hours, you can make your own website, and it can reflect what you have. But yeah, it's interesting dabbling with people's lives.
Yeah, and if there's a piece of information that you don't care for, I mean, just skip it.
Yeah,
There's not. I mean, there's going to be some things that I'll find that I'm like, okay, I don't. That part is not needed for whatever I'm doing. That's okay.
yeah.
Just. But somebody's going to find it interesting. There's always going to be somebody who finds it interesting.
There.
You're talking about BioGuide, and I mean, obviously I appreciate BioGuide being there because people that you would have had no clue even existed, they have information on there, but it gets a little bit onerous to read just because of that whole everything. It's a single paragraph. Everything's very dryly laid out, and it's like, well, we could maybe use like a few bullet points or something like that just to make it easier for people to read. But anyways, I digress on that. So let's move on to one of your other big projects that I mentioned in the intro, which is the One Voter project. So what led you to create that, and can you give us more details about its goals? I talked a little bit about them, what they're listed on the website, but just more detail about
Sure.
those.
Yeah. So Join California was my attempt to make a resource that was largely about election results and candidate biographies. But when I was doing these candidate biographies, I found out that there are stories. There are these great stories that really help people connect with history, whether it's a tragically flawed person or whether it's a hero. And so I was trying to figure out, like, is there a good way on Join California to have something that's more than a paragraph? Because a lot of times, if I'm putting in a footnote or a bullet point, if you get above a sentence or two, it starts getting pretty long. And so there are some stories, that you just want 3 or 4 paragraphs to write. Sometimes it's a whole page, and but it's a good story. And so I created One Voter primarily to serve as a place to tell stories from California political history or national political history that people might not be familiar with. One of the things that I have always done is try to avoid doing what other people are doing. And so, one of my favorites, I think it was in college. Somebody said, "Well, do you know how long you'd have to study Congress to become like the leading expert on Congress?" No, how long? Probably about 70 years. 60, 70 years. Like, to be the expert would take that long. And it's like, well, what about like a state legislature? It's like, depends on the state. Somewhere between 10 and 15 years, you really do become the expert on it because there are not people paying that attention. And so I try not to tell the stories that other folks have told. Every once in a while, there's just a different angle. Or a different lesson that I feel like is coming out of something that hasn't been conveyed before, and so I will retread what somebody else has done. But there are just so many stories out there that I do share on One Voter, and on social media that are just great stories. I mean, just amazing stories. I love those.
Yeah, and I really like that's the approach you take, as you all I mean, obviously a lot of the well tread stories are very interesting, but then sometimes like, okay, tell me something I don't know about, and a lot of these are important stories that need to be preserved, or they're just very curious, interesting things that they need somebody to talk about the story. And I think there's just a lot of people don't realize just how intriguing history is, which obviously we'll get into later on in this episode. But let's go more now to your work as the communications manager for the California State Library. So what are some of the projects you and your team have done with the library that you're really proud of that have helped to enhance civic and historical awareness in California?
Sure. One of my favorites. We've done a lot of different projects. One of my favorites was a few years ago. We had a large quantity of letters that were written in World War I between soldiers and their families back in California, and we had a project. It was a website called From the Page, and we would upload documents there, and volunteers would just transcribe them. And so it was this really cool project where, and you'd have multiple people would transcribe each page. So you just kind of, somebody wasn't sure, oh, I'm not sure what that said in cursive because cursive is not a thing we're taught so much anymore.
Yeah.
We would have multiple people looking at it. And so it was a really, really fun project because we were involving folks. Folks were getting to see letters that hadn't been seen in 100 years, but also by them translating it, they were being actively involved in helping other folks interact with those. We also did a digitization project for the executive orders of California. Governors can issue executive orders that are a bypass to legislation. And so we had one of those questions like, hey, how many executive orders have there been? Oh shoot, I guess that's a number. I guess we could figure that out. And so we actually had this system where we built that up and made a searchable database of executive orders so that people could understand what had led to executive orders, disaster declarations, proclamations, um, and how they might affect people's lives outside of the usual legislative process.
Oh, that's really cool. Have you? Well, you're in California, so I'm sure you've heard of it because it's started at UC Santa Barbara. But the American Presidency Project.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So you're the thing about the executive orders just made me think about how they have all of the executive orders that every president ever has ever signed and written, and that's I mean, I'm not going to be diving into every single one of them, but just to know that it's there, even if it's not something I'm going to specifically access, to know that it is there for somebody else to access who might have the time and come up with something very interesting to write about, that's really cool. And especially with governors, it's a lot harder to keep track of those. And then the letters, just those little, maybe not slice of life, but those more intimate moments that they had, like if husband's writing back to his wife or vice versa, or writing to their kids or their parents, and it's just really interesting to see that, especially because of the human aspect of it is just really cool. So really
Well,
appreciate that you have that
there
kind
was
of project going on there.
one
But
thing, and
oh yeah, go ahead.
it was so weird. It was, and I love the weird. It was a soldier. I believe he was from. I think he might have been a student at Stanford, who got deployed as a pilot in World War I, and he had photographs, he had letters, and one of the things that he had done was a crow had landed. I think it had an injured wing or something, and it showed up at this airbase that they were using for their operations. And the guy started having it sit on his shoulder, and then he taught it how to smoke cigarettes. And you're just one of these, like, it's this. Yeah, this is a guy who's in his 20s, and he's in this epic war, and the insights you have into, like who teaches a crow to smoke cigarettes in
Yeah.
war, and it was like, but he had pictures, and it was the most amazing. I mean, in the age of AI, it looks totally fake, but this was we were going through this like 2017 to 2018 before AI got that good, and it's this picture of a guy in a World War I uniform with a crow on his shoulder, and the crow has a cigarette coming out of its mouth, and looks so fake. It looks so fake by today's standards, but it was like, no,
Yeah.
it's real. It's somebody was quirky enough to do this back in World War I. And we tracked down his family. They lived down on the Central
Oh
Coast, and
wow.
I was like, can I ask you about your father? It was a woman she was born after he came back. I said, did he have a really interesting sense of humor? And she's like, he did. And I was like, I saw that. Okay, that's great. Okay, I'm good. Thank you. Yeah.
That's awesome. I got to say, World War One and World War Two veterans were something else. I mean, we still have a few World War Two veterans left, but obviously, unfortunately, we're very few and far between now. But yeah, just like I mean, obviously the sense of humor of some of them is giving a crow a cigarette is just. I mean, that's timeless. That's funny no matter what
Very wild.
generation you are. And then obviously, of course, just how young some of these guys were, and they're going off to wars. Like I I do not have the fortitude to do that. I do not have the capability, and I'm about to be 32 in August, and it's just these some of these kids are 10, 12, 14 years younger than me, and it's just. I mean, they were something else, that is for sure. But that's really cool to hear. So let's
Yeah.
move.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say we do that. We also do tours. We have 4 million books at the California State Library, and that's plenty to read. So I always tell folks this. My advice for everybody is, if you're reading a book and you're not enjoying it, stop reading it. There are plenty of other things to read. Don't feel like some folks, if you started a book, oh, I got to finish it. It's like you don't. I promise you don't have to finish it. You can let it go.
Yeah, I haven't done that with books, but I have done that with other things before too. And yeah, later on, just like, why did I do that? I didn't enjoy it. Why am I still doing this? But let's move on from the more specific work that you do to just your work in general, because
Sure.
we do have issues with civic awareness and understanding of history and society that need to be addressed. Obviously, much easier said than done. It's not going to be fixed with this one podcast episode. But in your experience, what has been one or two of your biggest obstacles you've encountered in trying to improve civic and historical understanding amongst the public? And what are some ways that you've helped to, for lack of a better term, mitigate these roadblocks?
Number one, far and away, is interest. People not feeling a connection with their lives, and it really is very little that comes anywhere near second place. But yeah, just people's lives are busy, and feeling like uh, politics is not something that they're involved in. That they don't choose, or or it's either that they don't feel connected, so they're not doing anything involved in that, or that by voting every 2 years, or perhaps you could vote in a primary too. You could vote twice every 2 years. That's the full and complete participation in a democracy. I go to jury duty when I'm called. I vote in elections. Ta-da! And that's it. And people feel like they have checked off the box, and it's like, no, there is more. There's definitely more involvement in a democracy. Folks are a lot. The obligations are higher. I guess that's one of the things. Both the rights and responsibilities are significant in a democracy. A really cool thing about a dictatorship, which are not cool, is you really you don't have to worry about voting. You don't have to worry about writing your elected officials. In a democracy, it's it's manifest. It is a requirement that the public remain involved. One of the I'd say, if there was a secondary thing, the thing that I would say is there's been a change in how this topic is taught in K 12 education. A few years ago, I was at a thrift store here in Sacramento, and I found a civics textbook from the 1940s. And my goodness, if you have not seen civics textbooks from the World War II era, they are they're amazing. They're amazing. It's like, come on, Americans, let's do this. And so I saw this thing, and then I realized that there was a 1930s civics textbook and a 1920s, like all on this row. Somebody had died and donated this to the thrift store. And so, questionable life choices. I bought them all, and I ended up with a collection of California. What started as civics textbooks back in about 1900 was when this collection started. And then by the 1980s, it had shifted to government. They teach government now. And um, I did not, prior to reading these books, I didn't think about it as, I mean, they're roughly equivalent, right? And it's like, they're not. Government is about them. Government is about a group of people that work for the government or are elected for the government. Civics is about the role of an individual in their society, in a democracy. And so civics is much more focused on you and what you are to do. And so that's one of the things I would say in California, at least, the transition in the 1970s into the 1980s from civics as a class to government, learning about how government works, is a major loss that we had, and will be very hard to recover from.
Wow, I never even thought of it like that. The difference between teaching civics and teaching government. Now it's who it's focused on. I really like that, because obviously this whole podcast and everything I do is one of the big things is devoted to improving civics education. And one of the topic I talked about a couple weeks ago, or at least a couple weeks ago by the time this episode airs, it was political apathy. And one of the things being just we don't really teach people why. Yes, there's some responsibility that people have to be interested in this stuff, but at the same time, we have to give them a reason, tell them why they need to be interested. And I think we don't really do as good of a job doing that, or we do try to teach people why they should care, but just for whatever reason the information is just not accessible, and it's just, I mean, it's a very complex situation. But I appreciate you basically speaking to that issue of teaching history. Even if we, people who do want to learn about history, sometimes it's hard for them to access it, or just the way we teach people about it is just not the right way, or at least could be better.
It
But
is substantially easier to teach someone government. There are three branches. Two are elected. One is and it's like government is leaps and bounds so much easier to teach than civics. Um, you teach government, it's like, what's the outcome? Yeah, the outcome is a test. You teach civics, it's like, what's the outcome? It's like an informed voter who's an active participant in their society. They go to city council meetings, talk during public comment, write letters. It's a very different outcome, and it's much harder. And so I get why they made that transition, but something was lost.
yeah, I can definitely agree with that. If I do something with that concept, I will be sure to, in future projects, I will be sure to quote you on that. Say, I got this from Alex Vassar. He's a cool guy. You should listen to him.
Random guy, yeah.
Yeah. Um, but more on this understanding of history, because it is an important endeavor for all of us, that all of us can do better in it. We're humans. We can all do better in it. But many people have their own conception of how history is played out. So not just more, so we're talking more not the people who were trying to get interested in history, people who already have some interest, but they basically already have their idea of what history was and how it happened. So it's very difficult to make people re-examine their beliefs, right? Unless they're self-aware about it. So as an historian and civic advocate, what are 1 to 2 ways that you think are effective in making people more open to really trying to learn history without preconceived notions, trying to re-examine what they thought about history?
I think one of the big tools is, and going back with the stories, is just trying to find a different way so that they don't feel like it's learning about someone else. It's learning about a different part of yourself, whether it's your family history, the things that your ancestors might have dealt with, um, or just a fact that shakes people up. If you tell somebody something that doesn't fit within their kind of structure, how they identify the world as having worked, um, the two options are they can dismiss it, or they can do the long, painful process of reevaluating how the world works together. And so I think one of the things that, if you're going to be in that role, is building up your credibility. Because if you just say George Washington was a woman, something like that, and it's like people are like, that is not, that doesn't sound. I am going to dismiss that out of hand. That
Yeah.
is, it will not change my understanding. There really is not anything you could tell me that would cause me to believe that. Um, so it just gets dismissed, and it's like, if you say, well, if you stick to the truth, and also you come and say, hey, I've spent a lot of time looking into this. I have really tried to understand it. Here's my understanding of how this is. But really, it's about how you are going to be uh, voting, how you're going to be interacting with the people around you, your society, your culture, your community. Um, this is important, and it really deserves the time and attention that you might not feel like you have, but it's important if we're going to last another 250 years. Um, so just trying to help people make the right decision when they're faced with one of those, the fork in the road between dismiss it or change my understanding. um make the choice to not dismiss it, question the information you're getting. Just because there was a really cool video that went along with it on Twitter doesn't mean it's real. But
Boy, yeah.
they do in fact find documents sometimes that really shake up how we understand
Yeah.
our culture.
Yeah, that's kind of one of my pet peeves. Just all these really nicely packaged videos on social media, and people just share them without another thought, and like they're clearly bent towards one side of the political aisle. I think with the bringing up George Washington, I think is a really interesting point. Besides the
Not a
fact that
woman, not a woman. Yeah,
yeah, well, yeah,
let's be
let's make
clear.
sure we make that clear. He was not a woman, but just the founding fathers in general, obviously, are seminal to American history. But that's kind of one of those flashpoints for I wouldn't say like a lot of people, but there's a sizable, maybe louder contingent where if you talk about the founding fathers and you just talk about all the great things they did and all they contributed to the country, but kind of swept under the rug the fact that many of them were also slaveholders, a lot of people are going to tune out. But then if you just focus on the slaveholding and then disregard how they contribute to the rest of the country, then you have another group of people that are just going to tune you out, and you got to really come up with that full on context. And sometimes it's difficult to confront with people like you, and you can acknowledge how complex people are at the same time. Obviously, you can understand the context of, okay, well, there were people that held slaves. That doesn't make it right, obviously, but it just kind of made me think of that with the whole founding fathers, especially. But what are some of the states? Do you have any particular states or school districts or other kinds of areas in the U.S. that you have seen teach political history well? And if so, what do you think makes them so effective?
Um, one of the programs that I think has done well, and I am far more familiar with California's state government, California state operations than other states. Within our state, one of the programs that I think has worked best is we have a program based at the state capitol called the Fellows Program, and it is a 1 year paid internship where each program has about 18, 20 participants, which is in a state of 40 million. That's going to take a long time to get through everybody. Um, not everybody's doing this, but it brings students. Generally, I think you have to be 21 years old and a college graduate, and you come to Sacramento, and they have this uh, onboarding. You're meeting with policy experts. You meet with historians. You do tours of state facilities. You go out to the Highway Patrol headquarters and see how highway patrol officers are trained. You go out. You can go out with a Caltrans road crew and see, like, do you know how a pothole, like, let's say there's one of these old potholes, like, how do they fill the pothole on the freeway so that it actually sticks and doesn't? And so there's this introduction to government, introduction to the state history, and then it's followed after about a 1 month orientation. It's followed by 12 months or another 10 months. Sorry, total is 12 months. Another 11 months of working in the state capitol in a state legislator's office, working on bills and understanding how the process works. How do you build consensus? And you learn, I think, one of the most important things that most folks don't know is the degree to which consensus or compromise is critical to how government works. I think I would go in, I'd be hard charging, and I'd convince them with my reason, and I would win. And it's like, that's not how legislatures work.
Yeah.
Legislatures are built on compromise, and um, it's both in this modern era. It's their weakness because compromise is not viewed positively, but it is ultimately in the long term. It is because you're trying to come up with a solution that meets the needs of a really wide range of people, and so yeah, it's hard. It's you can get 20 folks through at a time per year, but it's a really good civic education. Um, so I don't know. Good education is going to it takes a while. It takes multiple opportunities and to have access to a lot of information that most people in their daily lives are reaching for.
Yeah, definitely. And I really can appreciate that hands-on learning, even something you don't necessarily think it has, you don't really automatically think has something to do with politics and government. Simple as filling potholes. Well, actually, yeah, it does. And the thing about compromise is I want to do an episode of the podcast specifically about compromise. But yeah, for some people it is a dirty word, but or they want compromise. They just want the other side to compromise more, and they don't want to be able to have to give up anything. It's like, well, that's not how it works. Yeah, everybody's got to be a little take and give. Even if one party has an outsized grip on a government, you need some level of compromise. But speaking of more of that government work that you've seen up close, because you have worked in government as a policy specialist and a chief of staff, so you got some deep experience with the legislative process too. So what do you think should be, let's combine the work you did before in government with what you do now with history and civics. What do you think should be the state government's role in civic and historical education, whether it's for grade school kids, college students, adult education? And then how does local government factor into that?
So in California, local government has the primary role. The state kind of sets curriculum standards, and then we have different parts of the state that try to provide materials. But a lot of times, it's up to the actual teachers and the school boards to actually figure out what specific curriculum they're going to be making available to folks. So I think the local responsibility is often overlooked. The modern era, everybody wants to solve the problem at the highest possible level, and that's that's not how we're not made that way. It's if you solve stuff at the local level, uh, there will be difference in outcome, and that's another thing that's an issue. Is well, some folks are going to be really well educated. Yes, they will, and some folks will not. So I think in terms of what we do, we try to make materials available. Um, One of the things that we've really seen, particularly in California, but in other places, is like digested materials, where it's if you have an original document, whether it's a letter or some like we were talking about earlier, something that was made at that time that kind of interprets it's a product of that era. Um, you're seeing it through the lens of that time, and it requires stepping outside of your own life and your experiences, which is in itself another useful activity. Um, so much has been just digested where it's like, let me tell you about the founding fathers. Here's 10 pages on and it's it's either going to be oversimplified or it's going to be overly complicated person by person. And so I always really like um, connecting folks to the original documents. Here in California, we each legislator, so we have 120 state legislators, 40 senators, and 80 assembly members. Uh, each one is entitled to, once a month, they have a box of state constitutions. It's the state constitution, the Magna Carta, the federal constitution. It's this, it's a cardboard box. And they request it, and it gets delivered to their office, and they can do whatever the heck they want with, I think it's 24 copies of the state constitution and these other documents, Articles of Confederation. And so I always love, you can, a lot of times they don't request them all the time. And so you can go to a legislative office or visit a couple and say, hey, can I have your box for this month? Can I have your box for this month? And you can collect 200 copies of the Constitution very, very quickly. And then find a school and actually give students a copy, not just not like this is the one for the classroom. It's like, no, this is yours. Um, this is the rule book by which we play. You should definitely have a copy of this document, and so that's one of the things that I think is really good is connecting people with the original documents, so that they can read it themselves and interpret it and think about what things mean and what are the deficiencies in those documents.
I really like that because, and I was going to say with the U.S. Constitution especially, but it could also apply to the state constitution, is people already come into it with their preconceived notions of what exactly the Constitution is. Like if you talk about enumerated rights versus implied, or how malleable the Constitution is, as in like is it original intent, or uh, or does the meaning change over the course of time? Just those little things are really, well, not really little things, but those really get the gears going in their minds so that they can think a lot more critically instead of take whatever it was that they were told to think by somebody else. So that's really cool to hear. And I enjoy learning about history in general, of course, but I especially enjoy finding out weird facts about history. We just talked about that at the beginning of the podcast. So since you've compiled just a massively encompassing database on California political history, you mentioned a couple of them already, but what are a couple more wild, standout, and or interesting facts or stories about California political history that you want more people to know about specifically?
So there was one that I actually learned fairly early on, and it's not well known, should be, but it was um, well, there was this conflict. It was called the Cold War. It was big. It was long. It was terrible, and it ultimately ended. Uh, which is so crazy. It ended because the U.S. upped defense spending, and the Soviet Union wanted to match them. Like that was it was just this 1-for-1 ratio that's always match and match match, and so the U.S. spent a ridiculous and stupid amount of money on its military. Um, and when the Soviets tried to match it, they went bankrupt. Like they
Yeah.
ran out of money, and the Soviet Union collapsed, and the war ended. And so it's like, well, where did that come from? And it came from Reagan had a Secretary of Defense, Caspar Weinberger, and Caspar Weinberger had an autobiography where he talked about like that was kind of the idea was that they were going to bankrupt the Soviet Union. And what he said was um, he started his career. His earliest career was in the California State Assembly, and so he served in the assembly for a while, and then he served as director of finance, running the governor's budget. When Reagan was the governor of California, Caspar Weinberger was his um, director of finance. And so
Oh,
what he said was between his time in the legislature and his time as director of finance, he heard all of the best arguments that anybody had for raising the budget. And he wasn't a big budget raiser, but you get these like really compelling arguments for why we should spend more here. And so what he said was he used all of the arguments he'd ever heard, all the best arguments for raising budgets. He applied them to these defense programs, and that was how he got authority to up defense spending, up defense spending, up defense spending, and that was what ended the Cold War. And it was like, wow, well, like the training that he received in state government was the skills that he used that ended the Cold War, which for so long looked like it was going to end very, very hot and very fast and very bright, and it ended with what did I say? It was ended with a whimper instead of a
yeah.
bang.
I was
And
going to say the same thing,
it was
whimper.
yeah, it was. I mean, that was what it was. And so yeah, just kind of seeing how somebody was formed in the state legislature and within state government, and then took that to the national stage, was amazing. So that was one of my early like, oh my gosh, we did that. The California State Assembly.
That was us.
Well, that was us. We sent him there. Um, and then California, California's also had we've had not as many as some of the East Coast states, but we've had three presidents, uh, two of whom everybody acknowledges, and then one I always love it. Like it's like Reagan and Nixon. And it's like we also had Hoover. Um,
Oh, that's right. Hoover
so
was
when he
Californian.
was elected, it was Hoover of California was elected, and oh my God, you would not believe how many awkward conversations I had a year ago when Harris was running for president, and people would say, well, she would be the third president from California. Actually, um, that's fourth. And people go, no, 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 because Gerald Ford moved to Palm Springs after the presidency. And they go, like, well, but Gerald Ford didn't count as a Californian. It's like, wasn't counting Gerald Ford. But yeah, it was one of these like Hoover was Hoover of California. Uh, if you check the electoral college results, and yeah, it's just it's California. We do things sometimes.
I mean, I'd heard the whole bankrupting the Soviet Union because of they couldn't match our defense spending. That I'd been taught in back in high school, but I didn't know the part about how California had factored into it with Caspar Weinberger and all that. So that was pretty cool. And yeah, Florida, we technically Donald Trump is a Floridian. I don't think that
Yeah,
really counts, though. I mean, he was originally representing what, New York, and I mean, yeah, he lives down here now. I don't know if I can count that as a presidency, but so yeah,
Exactly.
in a case, California's got us beat there, but that's all right. Uh, well, one more question one more question before the non-political question,
All
the
right.
fun random question that I got. What is so now let's apply this to other places, so not California, that want to take something, whether it's something you've done or something you've seen done. What is some advice you'd give to other groups, be they educational groups, government agencies, whatever, that want to build political history databases similar to like JoinCalifornia.com or whatever you're doing at California State Library? What is some advice you'd give there?
The best advice I have is figure out what you want to include before you start. It is painful and disappointing to go back and add a category. I recently
Mm.
did that. I have a list. So California's had 4,500 state legislators, and I've got how old were they, birthdays, birthplaces, other offices held, got all this stuff. And then one of the things that came up that I didn't have was hometown.
Oh, yeah.
Where are they from? And I had to go back through 4,500 people, and I was like, "Oh my goodness! You know how much easier this would have been if I'd done this to begin with." And so it's like, no, it's if you're going to figure out, what it's, kind of doing. Folks are lines, and then the information is the columns. Figure out your columns. Oh my God, please!
Hmm.
Like it is painful to add another column later.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's figure out what you want to include and what you don't want to include. Um, I on Join California. I I have education as a thing, but I only include, this is stupid, but I only include universities that I attended, um, which drives some people to, well, they went to Harvard Law, and I was like, I didn't. If you would like to get Harvard Law to admit me, I would be
Yeah.
happy to
They
include
should
them on
they
my
should
list.
have taken me.
Should have taken me. I should have applied. But yeah, so I only include the universities that I attended, because I just felt like that was a way to put my little thing, my mark, goes my thing on this system, and because I wasn't, I don't know, I don't, it made it personal to me. Um, the one of the great lines from Sicario, the movie, it's personal to me.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so just figure out what you want to include, what you don't want to include, because there will always be suggestions later. Oh, you should have included this. Oh, you shouldn't have included this. Um, that's totally embarrassing that you included that. Yes, but I did. So
The education in particular, I mean, I kind of would do the same thing. I feel like if I were in your shoes, whereas like it feels like that's a little too cumbersome to add. But if I knew somebody, so the two, I bachelor's degree was University of South Florida, which is in
yep,
Tampa, and then I went to University of Florida for grad school. So anytime I find, especially for USF, if I find somebody that's from there, like, oh, I'm gonna note that. What are you kidding me? Of course I'm gonna do that. I mean, I think Harvard and Cornell and all of them, they've already got many people who have let you know that they're from an Ivy League school. So you guys have had enough. It's okay. But I do like, geez, just it just left my head. Oh, you were talking about adding categories later on, because I had a little bit of that issue with that the partisan history that I've been making. That sometimes I find some new information on somebody is like, wait, you know what? Maybe I should have looked to see if people from this other state had that. Especially when you get to people who have uh, multiple party designations, like if they did fusion voting. Oh,
right.
that's that purely from a selfish standpoint. Fusion voting is annoying just because then I gotta actually note, hey, this person was also as a this person, especially in New York, this Democrat was also working families and independent, and then this Republican was also conservative and
Yep.
Independence Party, and that just gets so
So we had that in
tedious.
California, and what I ended up doing was I was like, look, there's a primary party. Even if this person was, there were five parties currently operating, and they were nominated by three or even four of them. there was one primary party, and if you look at like
Yeah.
the primary law, you had to win your own primary to win any of the others. That's who that was going to dictate who you're going to vote for speaker. Like no, just for simplicity, like you can change parties. We've had folks that have changed parties, but in terms of that, like, do you want to count Republican Democrats, or there's Democrats, there's Democrat Republicans, Democrat Republican Greenback? It's like no, no,
Yeah.
no, no. Those are all Democrats. It's for clarity. I mean, there's and that's one of those you're gonna make a choice between how precise do you want to be, and then how easy do you want people to be able to relate with it and understand it, because there's no way that's not going to take a paragraph footnote at the bottom saying there's a subtle difference between a Democrat Republican and a Democrat. Um, they were nominated by it's like I don't. Yeah, for most of my stuff, I've been like that's not that useful.
Yeah.
Other folks do it and swear by it, and I'm like, well, that's fine. That's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah. If it's something that I think really needs to be pointed out, I make a footnote of it
Uh-huh.
personally. But yeah, it definitely makes things get a little more tedious. But sometimes you gotta wade through that. Somebody's got to do it, right? To wade through all that information, and then hey, if you want to learn more about this other specific stuff, you can go to whatever. Like I got the an older version of it, but the Congressional Quarterly Guide. So all the governors and U.S. House and U.S. senators up until 19, I think it was 94 is what that book has. But just a over 1,000 pages of just a treasure trove of information. So it's still really cool. And then I find the other stuff online and in other places too. But so let's now move on to the final question here, the fun,
Uh
random, non-political question. So if you're new to the show, I like to end with one of these just to change things up a bit, let listeners hear another side of the guest, and variety is good. It's the spice of life, as people say. So, Alex, today's random question of the day for you is: what common grammatical or pronunciation mistake really grinds your gears?
oh. Um.
I've already got one locked and loaded.
Oh, I was like the one that I just see, so the Oxford comma, not using the Oxford comma, is one
Thank
that
you.
it bugs me. Um, because I see where it should be, more than anything else. There's also the inflammable also means flammable. Like there's all those
Yeah.
things in the English language that don't quite make sense. But I would say Oxford comma. I like precision. I like having thoughts when they are separate thoughts. I like having them separated. And yeah, so that's mine. Oxford
I,
comma.
I am with you there, brother. I am team Oxford comma. That's actually not what I was gonna
Was not.
bring
Oh,
up,
okay.
but I just reacted because I heard you say it, and I was like, oh, he's team Oxford comma. That's my guy. I knew this was a good idea to bring you on this podcast. I just
That's the test.
something just like you need it to specifically separate those last two items. What are we doing? What if it's an actual item that is a X and Y?
Okay, so,
Yeah.
so hold on. So what were you going to say? What was your answer?
So mine is I and I see this all the time. This drives me nuts. When people say would of, could of, should of, it's like, what are we doing here? You see, there's an apostrophe VE. How do you get of out of that? It's would have, should have, could have. There's no universe where should of or could of or would have makes any sense. What are we doing here? I don't like this is the kind of stuff that we need to worry about more. Let's put aside the partisan and ideological stuff. Like, do you use an Oxford comma or not? Then I know whether to listen to you. Okay, maybe not that far, but
The,
no,
the other
I'm totally with you there on the Oxford comma.
the other one that is really, I think it's hilarious is what is Chat GPT uses the M dash a little excessively,
Oh,
and
yeah,
so it's this whole thing. It's like I like the M dash. I don't use it
I do
all the
too.
time, but I do like it as a, because I write very much the way I talk, and so just having a pause, I really like it,
Yeah.
but it's a mark of inauthenticity these days, and so it's no, it's I don't know. That was one of the great sadnesses of the last year or so was you can't use it anymore.
Oh
It's
yeah.
it will cause you as an author, it will cause people to doubt you, and so okay, I won't use
Yeah.
it. It's a tool. It's a tool, and to take a tool off the table that's somewhat useful sometimes. Shoot,
Yeah.
don't do
I,
that.
I use M dashes too, and sometimes I'll use a parentheses instead. I might like go back and forth, so I'm not like using one or the other too much. But people now complaining about M dashes is like, okay, yeah, the over usage of AI is a problem, but now everybody's just assuming that AI is being used,
Right.
which is a totally other issue.
That's one of the reasons I'm glad I started writing when I did back in the day, because people are like, oh, well, that was pre all of that. It's like, yes, 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 yes. I've been
Yeah.
doing this for a while. That's
Well, I hope people notice that from my own work too. But I feel like we can complain about all these kinds of things all day, but unfortunately, we got to wrap things up, and we've all got other stuff we've got to do too. So I just want to thank you, Alex, for being here. Actually, real quick, any other media or works that you would like to share?
one other thing, just kind of tied into your general topic, is always the importance of running for office and voting. I questionable life choices, as always. I ran for office in 2016 and 2020,
Okay,
and very proud. I received zero votes. I received a grand total of zero votes between my two elections.
you didn't even
Uh,
vote for yourself. Actually, I respect that.
no, I did not appear on the ballot. I
Oh,
it was running. It was a 5 member board. There were 3 seats open, and the first time I was the only candidate, and so the second time I was one of 3 candidates for 3 spots. And so I'm always like, look, that's a problem. I mean,
yeah,
it's not my problem. I really actually like that I got elected with zero votes twice. I served 8 years on this local park district board, but I'm always like, no, you guys, like, it's not my failure. It's a failure of the community if you can't find enough candidates to at least make the people earn votes. And so yeah, so I'm always that's it was one of those things. I did 8 years as an elected official, having received zero votes, raised $0 in my fundraising, um, zero endorsements, but still served 8 years as an elected official. I always would like to encourage folks, please run for office. Your voice is needed, and vote consistently, vote
yeah.
intelligently.
I mean, that's a whole other can of worms to open up is the number of uncontested races, and then sometimes they don't even appear on the ballot because
Right.
nobody's running. They're just like, okay, well, this one person there, we're not even going to bother listing it here. But yeah, that's might have to do an episode on that specifically. But yeah, definitely another one of our many problems we need to fix. But
We'll work on it.
unfortunately, we can't fix all our problems in this one podcast episode. But hope you all enjoyed listening to it anyways, and hope obviously think you all have gotten a lot out of this. I certainly have. So thank you all so much for tuning in. My links in the show notes, and I'll add some of Alex's stuff as well. My Facebook, Paul Rader, author and speaker, my LinkedIn, my medium.com profile where I write on political science from time to time, my website, my educational email course, 5 days, technically 6 days, where it talks about how to depolarize politics and how we unintentionally make polarization worse and how we can fix those mistakes. And my Matchmaker Maker FM profile if you want to be a guest on this podcast or you want me as a guest on your podcast. So, with that being said, we are going to wrap things up. So, as always, thank you so much for listening. And until next time, take care.